Okay, before you go and begin to do the readings and videos that I will be posting for you for this week, I want to highlight the gravity and the depth of the problem of evil. It is during this time I will ordinarily in my class take time to understand where each student is in regards to their view of evil and how much evil you believe that there is in the world. So some human beings just think, no, things are quite fine. It's not that big of a deal, and they are not reflecting upon the depth of evil that there is in the world. So to facilitate that, I am going to go ahead and go through about 17 points of evil. Now, a lot of this is taken from a masterful work on the field, which is Hume's Dialogues Concerning Natural Religion. That is the most historically and philosophically important work on developing the problem of evil and turning the tables on theists. So at the time, it was conventionally believed that God designed the world and everything was fine, and usually atheists had to wrestle tremendously to be able to make their point in the 1700s. But after Hume, Hume was able to turn the tables on theists, and now he puts the burden on us, and it is for us to be able to disprove that. So I'm going to go ahead through the different sections of it, and think of it in a cumulative case. So it's not just one point, it's one point upon another point upon another point, and all of these aspects kind of permeate our lives. So the first point is the evil that there is between nature versus nature. um, think of all the Discovery Channel documentaries that you have seen. You can hardly go 30 seconds without some animal being killed. It is the amount of suffering that is going on in nature right now, the prey that is being hunted by the by the by by the predators out there. It could be lions hunting hyenas and tearing them to pieces. It could be hyenas surrounding a lion and exhausting it to the point where it can't do anymore. It could be small little flies that land on the eyes of a horse and then lay their eggs there, and then it causes blindness in the horse. It could be the poor flamingos who get stuck in the mud and then dehydrate and die of suffocation in there without because of lack of food and dehydration. Um, it could be just a scorpion eating a cricket to things that are more that are greater in size, like an elephant being killed by other animals, or think of bacteria and how much damage they do. So everywhere you look, you see this. You see hawks coming and picking up a chicken and tearing it to pieces. So it can be the same with an owl. So nature is in constant warfare against nature. There is a chain of food chain in which each element is going to kill another element in nature, and then you have nature versus men. Now think of all the ways that all the things that we have to overcome. There is a weather, there are droughts, there are disease that enter us. There are things like Ebola and other things that come and affect us. There's the environment itself. There is allergies, which can make your life miserable. There are triggers that you may have from allergy-related issues. There is just the animals in the wild. We have fought the grizzly bears. We have fought many other the lions in Africa, and so that is an ongoing process that we don't seem to win. We are much more able to withhold that challenge, but it is there, and it's not going away. But then now, in our stage in life, in history, we get to another level, which is the conflict between man versus man. The most successful predator against man is man itself. Even though we fear sharks the most, I know how to stay away from sharks' reach. I can just simply not go into the ocean. But how do you escape your fellow human beings? The amount of suffering that human beings do to each other, it's just horrifying. And that can go from the weird psychopath to just simply the person who is harming you without knowing that they are harming you. And there's a large degree, and then you have, of course, the warfare, the large scale warfare, which takes millions upon millions of human beings, either by terrorism or by declared war. But it is a horrifying reality. So man is the most successful predator of men, and we're surrounded by that, and we are constantly having to guard ourselves against it. That's why you lock your doors. That's why some of you own firearms, and some of you take fighting training classes and alarm systems. It's because of this kind of evil. And then another form of evil is men versus women. The oppression that has been there on both ends throughout history, one by emotional manipulation, the other one by just downright despotism. Men has been ruthless towards women, and in subjugating, abusing, keeping them ignorant throughout history, and that means more than half the world population has been subjected to this. And then, of course, you have what begins as a hopeful endeavor, which is marriage, and then it proceeds into divorce. And so, what began as a you can't live without this person, now you can't live with this person at all. It becomes unbearable, and for those who have undergone divorce, they say that it is the most traumatizing thing that you can go through. You sometimes hope that the other one would have rather die rather than being there and constantly in your life and having to deal with them in court. And so, uh, men versus women, the psychological ramifications of that, the ongoing battle that goes on in insulting and undermining each other and cheating on each other and wounding one's pride and ego and self-love and humiliation, and that is quite an extent of evil right there. And then after you undergo those four levels of evil, there are many other layers of evil that we are going to deal with. You may come across human beings that believe that they are an island of bliss in a sea of misery. And this one makes the problem pretty much worse, because for a person to believe that they are an island of bliss in a sea of misery and to be content with that, it kind of raises the level of callousness to a new understanding. It's how can you be happy when your father is in its decrepit old age, when your mother is destitute of shelter, when your brother is going through divorce? How can you look at that and think, hey, this is a wonderful life to live? So you are, in a sense, adding to the problem by being callous. Then there is pessimism. Um, some people say, hey, you know what, Mr. G, the problem is not that bad. The problem is that you have a bad attitude and you're only looking at the bad side of life. There is another bright side of life, but there is nothing really to complain about. Now, this objection actually makes the problem worse, because if there is nothing to complain and people turn pessimistic and negative, that becomes gratuitous evil. There's no need for it, and you somehow bring it upon yourself. It just simply makes the problem worse. Now you have a human being that, when there is no reason to complain, they come up with something uh, to destroy themselves about. Then you have man versus self. The number of uh, self-inflicted psychological harm that we do. It may be self-esteem problems. We look at ourselves and self-deprecate and constantly judge ourselves harsher than others judge us. It may be phobias. You may develop a phobia to the mall, a phobia to crowds. You may have a phobia to strangers. You may have a phobia to the dark. Phobia to spiders. And so you can develop, I mean, there is almost unlimited to what you can be afraid. And we do that to ourselves. You can develop split personalities. You can have bipolar reactions. You can have constant self-doubt. So that is another layer of the problem. And then you have the question of uh, uh, suicide. Some say, if life was really that bad, then people will commit suicide in greater numbers. But I think Hamlet had it right in Shakespeare. Shakespeare wrote those lines when Hamlet was trying to commit suicide, and he says, to be or not to be, that is the question, whether or not to commit suicide. But then he says, whether it is nobler in the flesh, in the mind, to subject ourselves to the outrageous fortunes, the arrows of fortunes in our life, or to end life, rather than putting up with it, just take it out, take out your life. But then he says, what dreams shall come when we shuffle off this mortal coil must give us pause. And so there is this fear that we don't know what's going to happen after death. And so what Shakespeare concludes in Hamlet is, it's not that we love life so much, it is that we are terrified of death. And we're not bribed into existence, we're just terrified of what could happen after. And then you have, on top of that, um, you have other forms of evil that come into our lives, and that is after suicide, uh, you can have the idea of hopes that we have, like retirement. So many human beings try to find contentment in retirement, but then they don't realize that as soon as you retire, you end up in a city like a mausoleum. Retirement just becomes suffocating, and by the time you get to retire, most of the time you can't even enjoy it. Your body has already given out on you, and so that is one of the problems with retirement, is that it is a glorified escape, but then it turns out not to be as glorious as people believe it to be. It gets boring after some time. So retirement, then some people think, well, maybe family. It's all about family. It's not that bad. They don't realize that most of the crimes that we undergo, especially the ones in sexual nature, are done by families. Um, it's most likely 70% of the person that will assault one of your children or assaulted you was a relative rather than a stranger. Families end up in codependence. I help you, you help me, but then it becomes a constant bickering between one another as to who is getting more, and the resentment that grows over the year, and then people taking advantage because you're family. They can walk away and not pay their debts, and take advantage of other things. And so you have that in families, that it can become um, this suffocating relationship, which makes the problem even worse. And so some people say, well, maybe ignorance is bliss. That's the approach. The least I know about the world, the happier I am. That's why I don't check the news. That's why I simply go out there and live in the mountains, take a vacation, go hiking for a few days, disconnect myself. And people speak of that as a glorified sense of life, and without recognizing that that is all the more proving the point, which is, yes, life is so filled with misery, and trying to escape that by ignorance is not a high assessment of human life. If what it takes for you to be to be to have a meaningful existence, for you to digress to an infant style of livelihood, then what is the point of growing up? What is the point of maturity? He said that's escapism, um, and that is only going to lead to isolation. And isolation in and of itself lacks that fulfillment of life. So ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance is a very low assessment of human life. So at this point, I'm going to pause here. I hope I've given you enough reasons. There are several others that we can go into to discuss and just get a sense of how terrifying this problem is. So as believers, we cannot minimize it and simply say, well, it doesn't matter. When I die, I go to heaven. And for unbelievers, we cannot disregard their concern there, because this is real. And if that concern is not addressed, then don't expect that they will see the need for redemption and for sin. So keep that in mind. and I will upload the readings and get it all ready for you guys. Have a good day. Bye.